Hello and welcome to the second part of our look at the life and music of Jim Davidson. Last time we traced Jim's career from his beginnings at the Ambassador's restaurant in Sydney through to his highly successful leadership of the ABC Dance Band in the late 30s. And although obviously marred by the outbreak of war in 1939, it wasn't such a bad year for the ABC Dance Band, which at this stage was unaffected by army call-ups and the trappings of war. In fact, 6 months before war broke out, the orchestra was actually augmented by the American Jack Carpenter, who added another piece to the saxophone section and also contributed to vocals.
You can hear it for a penny. See, just a penny serenade. In her eyes shone the tender dawn of love and sweet surrender. As for me, in my heart I played a lover's serenade. See, hear my love song for a penny. See, just a penny serenade. For that night so divine she was mine, though no word had been spoken. When I woke from my dream she was gone, and my poor heart was broken. Still I pray that wherever she may be, she will remember in her heart. She will always hear my penny serenade. See, that's my love song for a penny. See, just a penny serenade. Just a penny serenade. Just a penny serenade.
Vocalist Jack Carpenter with the ABC Dance Band under Jim Davidson in March 1939. The talents of the band's female vocalist Alice Smith also stretched to comedy as she demonstrates under the pseudonym of the atrocious Mabel in this 1939 recording of Snake Gully Swagger.
Gully. Say hello, Mabel.
Hello, everybody.
How about singing this song for us?
Oh, I'd like to do that.
Good girl.
Everybody around the place will dance to it. It's gonna set the pace, so prance to it. It's a snifter, body lifter, the Snake Gully swagger. Every tramp along the road will play to it. Farmers help to load their drays to it. Even abos and their tabos do the Snake Gully swagger. All the pigs in the pen, the roosters and the hens are doing it now. The ducks and the drakes are doing shimmy shakes. Why, even Sally, our champion cow, grab your partner round the waist and go to it. With every step you take, you'll glow to it. It's a spry dance, dinky die dance, the Snake Gully swagger. Gully jitterbugs. Oh.
Alice Smith doing her impression of Mabel on Snake Gully Swagger. I wonder what Dad and Dave would have thought of that one. Well, in slightly more conventional vein, she sings another popular song of 1939, Hang Your Heart on a Hickory Limb. Hang Your Heart on a Hickory Limb, the ABC Dance Orchestra under Jim Davidson with Alice Smith. On November the 17th, 1939, a couple of months after the outbreak of war, a concert to raise funds for the Red Cross was given in Sydney Town Hall, and Jim Davidson and the orchestra were featured, and they shared the stage with Nick Lucas and the comedy harmonists who were touring Australia at the time. 3 days later, the orchestra was accompanying the Mills Brothers at the Sydney Tivoli, and broadcasts of this were made over ABC Radio. However, if it sounds as if the war was being forgotten by everybody in Sydney, the very next day, November the 21st, 1939, Jim Davidson and the ABC Dance Orchestra recorded this. We're going to hang out the washing on the Seafleet line. Prophetic words, perhaps. Jim wants to go overseas, but not quite yet, and not to the Siegfried line. On December the 1st, the orchestra gave a concert for the war effort in Sydney's Martin Place, and you might well have heard this song.
Bluebirds in the moonlight, silly ideas, bluebirds in the moonlight, but that's how I feel when I'm with you. There are night owls in the daylight, silly ideas, night owls in the daylight, or maybe my heart is saying, ooh, 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 ooh. Who is the one for me? the moonlight, but that's how I feel when I'm with you.
Bluebirds in the Moonlight with Jack Carpenter, the American saxophonist, doing the vocal. April the 26th, 1940 saw the band at the ABC Ball at, of all things, the Sydney Trocadero, and the following month they were back on the stage of the Sydney State Theatre, moving to Melbourne State Theatre for 4 weeks in July. On November the 23rd, 1940, Jim Davidson entered the Columbia Studios at Homebush in Sydney for the last time as a civilian. Although Jim's contract with the ABC was renewed in January 1941, on May the 30th he enlisted in the AIF. Jim explains how it happened.
The war was on. Most of my colleagues were joining the army, There were some press items about the troops in the Middle East needing entertainment, and the then Minister for the Army, Sir Percy Spender, he was Mr. Percy Spender then, invited Jim Gerald to take some entertainment to the troops in the Middle East. Jim, of course, said he would if he were given a rank, and he was given the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, and subsequently asked me if I would like to join up. And I didn't even talk about it with my wife. She learned that I had enlisted through the stop press of the Sydney Sun.
Also to join up from the ABC Dance Band were Sergeant Wally Portingale, Corporals Keith Atkinson and Bob Atkinson, Chick Donovan and Canadian Laurie Brooks. Lieutenant Jim's last recording session in Sydney was in July of that year, when he led the ABC Dance Band in two compositions by Jim Gerald, Wally Portingale and himself, called Fallin' Brother and Who'll Put the I in the AIF.
Take it, we all know that. Plays this old war game the same as with a bat. Back in the homeland, there's a ton of strife, but every man's a fighter to save the kids and wife. The glorious name of Anzac can never be let down. The boys are all excited, and the country and the town. There's a grand job of work, and it's got to be done. So who'll make another to wear the rising sun? Who'll put the I in the AIF? Come on, boys, let's go. Put away your civvies till the day that you come back. Learn to use a rifle, you'll soon get the knack. All the girls will love you in your khaki suits, the old cocked hat and the big army boots. It's a grand job, it's a man's job, and you'll have to pull the country through. Who'll put the I in the AIF? Will you, or you? Girls will love you in your khaki suit, the old cocked hat and the big army boots. It's a grand job, it's a man's job, and you'll help to pull the country through. Who'll put the I in the AIF? Will you, or you?
Stirring stuff indeed. Well, in November 1941, the entertainment unit left for the Middle East on the biggest ship in the world, as Jim pointed out, the Queen Elizabeth, 86,000 tons. And author Frank Clune spotted them in Tripoli, meeting Colonel Jim Gerald, responsible for entertainment to the Australians, and his Chief of Staff, Captain Jim Davidson. They wined and dined and then to the theatre, where the two Jims were putting on a show called All in Fun. And they have a full house, he says, jamming room only. All in Fun was an all-in show, a credit to all in it. Hats off to producer Jim Gerald and maestro Jim Davidson, worth his weight in wisecracks. no prizes for guessing the title. Of course, the well-known tune In the Mood, made popular by Glenn Miller during the war, but the difference is that the orchestra was the Army Entertainment Unit under Jim Davidson, recorded in Beirut in 1942. He did some other recordings. They were for the Australian Forces Network, which was being set up at the time. He also broadcast over Jerusalem Radio. And another number they recorded was with vocalist Laurie Brooks. It's a Lovely Day.
Page of your paper is bound to make you sad, especially if you're the worrying sort. So turn the front page over when news is not so bad. There's consolation in the weather report. It's a lovely day tomorrow. Tomorrow is a lovely day. Won't you feel your tear-dimmed eyes? Today your heart seems weary, if every little thing seems wrong, just forget your troubles and learn to stay. Tomorrow with a lovely day. It's a lovely day tomorrow. Tomorrow is a lovely day. So forget your troubles and learn to say tomorrow is a lovely day.
The Australian Army Entertainment Unit under Jim Davidson, recording in Beirut in Lebanon in 1942. In a curious way, the Davidson band and the tunes it played seems to have crept into the subconscious of the diggers in the Middle East, as war correspondent John Fleming reported from the front.
And so it was the spirit of Anzac lived again, and took Bardia, and after it Tobruk, and Derna, and Bachi, and Benghazi. But to me, the highlight of all that first Libyan campaign was that morning of the attack on Bardia, when the Aussies went singing into battle. Certainly, honor and nobility were with them on that cold desert morning, when they rose up in all their magnificence and went to keep an appointment with the Wizard of Oz.
We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. The wonderful Wizard of Oz. We hear he is the whiz of a whiz, if ever a whiz there was. If ever, oh ever a whiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. The wonderful Wizard of Oz. We hear he is the Wizard of Wiz, if ever a whiz there was. If ever, oh ever a whiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. We're off to see the Wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Off to see the wizard. Of course, the Davidson Army Orchestra wasn't necessarily always the only form of entertainment available at the front, and often it wasn't available at the front, and diggers usually made their own entertainment.
This is the ABC Field Unit with the RAF in Tobruk, and we bring you a concert by a party of diggers who until a week ago were frontline infantrymen. Even now they're only a few miles behind the front, for we're broadcasting from an ammunition cave that the Italians laboriously tunneled out of the side of a hill. Floor, walls and ceilings are solid concrete, and the cave is now packed with about 400 troops. Every man has his rifle with him, or should have, just to remind him that although he's at a concert, he's not far from the front. Concerts are a rarity in Tobruk, and that it's not often that the troops can go to them. But these men are in reserve now after a long spell at the front, but you'll soon see that even Tobruk can't get them down. Their stage tonight is a rough platform hung with army blankets and camouflage nets. The footlights are car headlamps, shielded by cut-down kerosene tins. Well, that's the picture. And now for the performance. And here's Cyril Huggett of Concord, New South Wales, to tell you just what's what.
Well, here we are, a gang of diggers from an infantry brigade. They call us the Rats of Tobruk, but we can still sing, and here's our opening number, Bless 'em All. Cheer up, my lads, let them all, the long and the short and the tall. There'll be no promotion this side of the ocean, so cheer up, my lads, let them all.
A digger concert live from Tobruk, as it were, led by Chester Wilmot. Meanwhile, Jim Davidson was going up in the world.
We had our own unit. Lieutenant Colonel Gerald was the OC, and I was the adjutant of the unit. And what I didn't tell you earlier on, when I joined the Army, I was made an honorary lieutenant. And one of the happiest times and most satisfying times of my life was when in Beit Georgia in Palestine in 1941, General Blamey pinned my third pip on my shoulder himself in a tent on the desert and made me an honest-to-goodness substantive officer.
But for Jim, within the year, it was back overseas, in fact, back to Sydney, and over the rainbow.
Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. There's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh why can't I?
Well, that honest-to-goodness substantive officer found himself back in Sydney via Tasmania in October 1942, having taken the smallest ship in the world, the Troyer, flying the Danish flag and boasting 15,000 tons instead of the 86,000 tons of the Queen Elizabeth that he'd come out in apparently the chilliest conditions as well, as Jim was wearing all his overcoats and sweaters, according to him. By February 1943, things couldn't have been more different, climatically speaking, because the unit under Captain Jim was in New Guinea, entertaining, of all people, the Americans.
And we're building an airstrip, and entertainment for them was very short. It was mooted that Lanny Ross was about to descend upon the American forces. In the meantime, we were asked if we could do something to entertain them. And I built a show, and we called it the 50-50 Army Show. Half Australian Army personnel and half American Services personnel.
The concert took place in pouring rain and the audience sat on wooden boxes, but the point was that the Aussies were entertaining the Americans, and perhaps this did more than anything at the time to foster good relations between the forces.
Can't go to the picnics in Hooligan's Grove. No corned beef and cabbage is cooked on her stove. She marries Sir Reginald, what's his name? Ain't it a shame, poor Maine, poor Maine. Ain't it a shame about Maine? Now she lost all her spark and flame. She wears sables instead of a skirt and a blouse, and has to keep shoes on when she's in the house. She married Sir Reginald, what's his name? Ain't it a shame, poor Maine, poor Maine. And she has to be social, has to go to the nightclub, has to dance like a Cuban and still act like a lady. Or to think that a child of Mike O'Grady would marry Sir Reginald, what's his name? Ain't it a shame about Maine? Poor Maine, poor Maine. Ain't it a shame about Maine?
Jim's 1940 recording of Ain't It a Shame About Mame. Well, from 1943 until the end of the war, the unit moved around various places throughout Australia giving concerts to troops, and Major Jim Davidson, as he was now, had his HQ at Pagewood outside Sydney and was in control of, among things, 20 frontline shows, and as such was Australia's biggest theatrical entrepreneur. Leaving the army at the end of the war, Jim joined the Tivoli group of theatres as director of productions until 1947, and then in September of that year he left Australia for a world trip, ending up in England in the spring of 1948, where he joined the BBC as assistant head of variety music. His appointment was marked by a dinner at the Savoy Hotel with leaders of the music scene. In fact, one of the newspapers, the Sunday Chronicle of May the 9th in 1948, said the man who must save our dance music is Jim Davidson, and soon Jim became known within the BBC as something of an innovator.
I don't think it's very difficult to be an innovator anywhere after you've had 4.5 years in the army trying to make something out of very little. And I suppose it was a good schooling for me in later years, and I suppose I came to the BBC quite fresh after having innovated for the army. And they were having trouble with their dance music, something I knew a little about, and they were having trouble with discriminating between the sheer dance music values and vis-a-vis the entertainment values. And I spent an awful lot of time, most of my time in the first 2 years at the BBC, in trying to inculcate the dance musicians into not expecting their paying public to look at them and dance them all night glaring at a piece of manuscript. So the upshot of it was that after 6 or 7 months of pushing and shoving, we managed to get a fair amount of entertainment into their programs, including Ted Heath. Ted Heath was very violently opposed. My music is my business, he used to say to me. Do you see? And I said, well, try and make it a little more visual, which he did. And from 1949 until he died, he was one of my greatest friends.
Ted Heath and his music, and Hindustan. It wasn't just a different approach to band music that Jim Davidson was looking for in the BBC. He also approached things like the idea of the singing group.
All sorts of innovations were put in train. One of them was called the Sing Band. And it was simply an extension of the collegiate choral groups. And they became extremely efficient. Hal Kemp was one of them. And the latest one now that is a tremendous success all over the world, I'm sure. I've heard a lot of his stuff here, Ray Conniff. And that's how it was not very much different from the pushing the bands for entertainment. We just wanted a greater variety, so we pushed the singing groups.
Sing it again, let's hear that song again. That catchy tune that makes you want to sing it again. There's songs to make you sing and songs to cheer you. And if you sing with us, we hope the neighbors hear you. So why not sing it again?
With Rose Brennan, Valerie Masters, Kathy Kirby, Vince Hill, Michael Redway, the Ronnie Price Quartet, and today's guest, Rolf Harris.
The words of music make you want to sing it again. Just take that catchy tune and sing it again.
Slip into first gear, up with the clutch, and Rose is away.
I may be wrong, but I think you're wonderful. I may be wrong, but I think you're swell. I like your style, say, I think it's marvelous. I'm always wrong, so how can I tell? All of my clothes are unsightly, all of my hats are a crime. If tearing you up ignitingly, it's the very first time you came along, say, I think you're marvelous, I think you're grand, but I may be wrong.
Vince is indulging in a do-it-yourself medical checkup.
This can't be love because I feel so well. No sobs, no sorrows, no sighs. This can't be love, I get no dizzy spell. My head is not in the skies. My heart does not stand still just to hear it beat. This is too sweet to be love. This can't be love because I feel so well. But still I love to look in your eyes.
And Valerie has a new version of the Threepenny Bit opera.
Still half a sixpence is better than half a penny, is better than half a farthing, is better than none. It's the token of our eternal love. When you're far away, touch it every day. And though that half a sixpence can only mean half a romance, remember that half a romance is better than none. But when I'm with you, 1 and 1 make 2, and likewise 2 half sixpences joined together make 1.
Here's me darling Michael. I'll have to change his ideas.
Life is nothing without music. Music helps the world along. While the orchestra is playing, my heart is singing a song of love. Dear, let's forget about those gray days. We'll be happy while we dance. Tunes we love will make us realize that life is nothing without music. Where there's music, we'll find romance.
You won't find Kathy in a creek without a paddle.
And then he'd row, row, row. Way up the river he would row, row, row. A hug he'd give her, then he'd kiss her now and then. She would tell him when. He'd fool around, and then they'd kiss again. And then he'd row, row, row. A little further he would row. And then he'd drop both his oars, take a few more on course, and then he'd row, row, row.
I asked Jim what his policy had been consistently through his career in the BBC and his approach to music.
Simply appeal. If you look back at my own early band in the 30s, 33, 34, 35, 36, you will find that all the vocalists that I engaged, Alice Smith, John Warren, Jack Carpenter, Laurie Brooks, Dick Cranbourne, they all had that simple heart appeal. And I tried to duplicate it with the soloists, the instrumental soloists. And instrumentally, Keith Atkinson, Frank McLaughlin, Norman Litt, Jim Gussie, Stuart Dawkins, George Trevere, they all had this feel. And the young man at the time who had did most of my orchestrations, he had a marvellous feel for the heart in music, Wally Portingale. So did Bill Doyle. He was the other pianist, and Gordon Rawlinson. They all had this feel for the appeal in pop music. And that's what I sought. And if you play records, or if you listen to records like Penny Serenade with Jack Carpenter, or Tisket a Tasket, or John Warren singing Bluebird of Happiness, you'll hear that same appeal, and you'll hear that appeal carried on by the band. And that's what I tried to get, and as a matter of fact, I kept that same policy when I went to London and joined the BBC. And you will hear it in a series I started there called Music for Sweethearts. You'll hear that same appeal. Simple, but very, very melodic, quite broad in ensemble.
Eric Jupp and the orchestra embodying that Davidson appeal. Well, Jim's career at the BBC ended very much as it began, with a lunch at the Savoy with a whole lot of band leaders, in fact the cream of English band musicians. I got a photo in front of me of Jim conducting with a knife, might I add, belonging to the Savoy Hotel. People such as Ted Heath, Acker Bilk, Ken McIntosh, Giraldo, Edmundo Ross, Victor Sylvester, to name but a few. And his last concert at the Albert Hall ended just like this. Frankie Vaughan does the tribute, and just listen to the applause.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we're almost to the end of this show, and I have the very great pleasure and the very great honor to do something which is most unusual in this show, because this show has been an idea of one man. And since he came over to this country, he's made a tremendous success of his job. I know I'm speaking with authority because, well, a lot of people behind me in the backstage and all around BBC love this man very dearly. His idea was this Pops for Everyone. It was his idea that was started in 1955. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a bittersweet thing in as much that tonight is his last show before he goes back to his native land in Australia. So when I bring this gentleman on, and when I present him with the one thing that he wanted more than anything else, which was just an autograph book of all the artists who've appeared in his shows, I'm introducing a very humble and a very great man. So ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it. Let's give him a wonderful send-off. I'm talking about Mr. Jim Davidson. Jim.
That's the programme for this evening. On behalf of Peter McCormack, thanks to Val Napthine, this is Tony Baldwin saying good night.
Jim, as you asked for, here is just a book, a blue book, BBC, Popular Music Concerts, Royal Albert Hall, London, from 1955 to 1963, full of dear love for you. Jim, it's not your life, it's a big part of his life there. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is neither the time nor the place for speech making,
But there's one thing I think you would like to know. That 9 years ago we started these, and we could not have kept them going without your support. Thank you.
ABC Radio 1 and 3, Eastern Time is 9 o'clock.